Welcome, welcome to September 18th class of Managerial Economics. We're going to be doing chapter 7 things today. Would you guys like to just jump right into the problems, or do you want to do a little bit more on the test? Yes. Or would you like to just do some more lecture first for the? Just jump right into the problems? Let's do it. All right, so chapter 7, into the book or into the chapter is going to be page 255. And remember, chapter 7 is the nature of industry. Sounds way more interesting than it is. All right, so let's start off with an easy one. So question number 1. We are told that there are 10 firms competing in a market to sell product X. The total sales of all firms is equal to $2 million. Ranking the firms' sales from highest to lowest, we find that the top 4 firms' sales are $260,000, $220,000, $150,000, and $130,000 respectively. Calculate the 4-firm concentration ratio for product X. Go. Give me 30 seconds. Maybe a minute and 30 seconds. We gotta get our calculators out, right? Can I do something like previously? Snapshot. Oh, freeze. Freeze. Okay, so then I can work on it. G. Okay, I forgive you. All right. Anybody have the answer yet? I heard someone whisper it. Just take credit. Yep.
And I mean, so it's ratios that be like, like point something. So then I just figured it would be this over.
It is, yes. Very good. Or, yeah, 0.38. Any questions on that? Awesome. Moving right along. I asked, calculate the 4-firm concentration ratio in the market for product X, and I was just reading right out of the book for question 1. So that's equivalent to what we did, or what we talked about in class on Monday. Good question. Other questions? Sorry?
So, I mean, you said that's 10 firms.
All we care about is the top 4. So it will specify. So there can be other concentration ratios, but the top 4 is the most common one. It's the only one that the book like has bolded and thinks isn't a big deal. Does that make sense? So for the test and things like that, it'll just be either the 4-firm concentration ratio or the HHI, which we're going to go over next, right? And we see actually in the data that the book shows that they will often say the same things about like where industries are, but sometimes they won't. And part of that is because this one only cares about the top 4. There could be a 5th industry that does 120,000, and that's not, or the 5th industry could do 10,000. Right? And that information is not included in this concentration ratio, but it would be included in the HHI, which we're going to do next. Yes? I mean, that's not quite dominating. If we look at some of the other, so one second. On page 208 in your text, table 7-2, we can see that some industries are highly concentrated, right? 90% concentration of breweries, 87% concentration of computers with the top 4, which makes sense, right? There's Apple, there's HP, there's Dell, there's, I mean, but like there's Lenovo, but I think Dell bought Lenovo, right? I mean, there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions happening in the electronic computer market in the last 10, 20 years, right? Fluid milk, why do they have to differentiate between, let's say, fluid milk? Because powdered milk is a staple in a lot of different places in the world, right? It's way cheaper to import powdered milk than it is to import fluid milk. But this is just talking about U.S. concentration, right? So 46% of the fluid milk production is dominated by the top 4 firms. Ready mix concrete, that's only 23%, right? So that's a more competitive market in terms of the top 4. Only they have a quarter of the total market. Soft drinks, it seems like that should be higher, right? It's 52 for the top 4, but there's Coke and there's Pepsi, right? I mean, maybe there's like Dr. Pepper or everything else. So, but what's going on here? Why is it so low? Why is it much lower than our intuition would suggest? What's the definition of soft drink here? It's not, though. It's a bunch of stuff. It's like fruit drinks, fizzy drinks, ginger beer, ginger drinks. That's what they're calling soft drinks. And so why are they grouping all those things together in soft drinks? Because essentially, like, you have to stop somewhere, right? The industries, are like, you can't have it be so granular, right? Because then there's going to be no concentration in any industry. And you can't have it be so vague because, or sorry, you can't have it be so granular because then there'll be a lot of concentration in every industry, and you can have it be super vague because then there will never be concentration, right? So we have to pick somewhere to stop, and the reason why they include those other ones in addition to just like the brown and clear, sugary fountain drinks that all of us call soft drinks, right? The reason why they include the other things is because there's a high, there's a large and positive cross price elasticity, right? They're large substitutes, and so anything that has kind of a significant enough cross price elasticity is going to be included in that industry. It's going to broaden that industry, and so then it might show up as less concentrated according to these things, specifically according to the C4. The C4 is a bit more prone to these errors than the HHI. What's going on with breweries? Are there really 4 breweries that only sell 90% of the total sales of beer here in the United States? So what's another flaw of this this C4? And yeah, just the C4, I believe. It doesn't take into account foreign firms that sell beer to us. So all the German and Australian and Canadian and English and, right, all of that beer that we buy here in the United States, that's not included in the denominator or the numerator. They don't get to compete. So it's kind of a limitation of the data, I believe, in terms of, you know, the census has been collecting this a particular way for a particular amount of time. And so they just probably didn't have access to that information. And that's why they left it out of there. I can't think of a very valid reason to volitionally leave it out of there, right? Not as much. I mean, there's really only like Doritos, right? I mean, what other soft drink am I drinking that's even like the ginger beer and the other weird stuff? I'm pretty sure that's not foreign, no. Yeah, they really do.
Yeah, so it's not the same thing. Like we don't export it from here or import it. Yeah, that's why I was asking. I mean, I know that's fine. It's full, so it's like you don't have to export, right?
Well, I mean, the reason, so I'm not exactly certain the reason why it tastes different in each country, but what I'm gonna wager, and if anybody wants to look into this and email it to me, you know, give you extra credit or something, what I'm gonna wager is that it's the same syrup and it's the same bottling facility and technology. The only thing that's different, maybe not the formula, the water. I think it could be the water. But you can buy Coca-Cola with real sugar now in the United States because we. Really? Right. Right. McDonald's has different menu items in different countries and stuff. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
And shake is good too. Even the pizza over there. Yeah. Pizza tastes good. I'm talking about a burger in a McDonald's. Yeah, like if you taste it in Europe, like the first time I went.
Well, part of that has to do with the regulations about GMO, like the how they raise them and the practices, antibiotics and stuff. Yeah, we stuff our livestock full of antibiotics, you know, because then we can keep them in smaller pens and we can get more ROI for each acre of land, right? So, you know, at the end of the day, yeah, it makes for cheaper but not as tasty beef, right? No, I agree. But we're talking about the mass-produced stuff. Yeah, we're talking about McDonald's ground beef. But you can't even buy that low quality of stuff in a place like Germany. You know what I mean? Like, but also the euro is more expensive than the dollar, right? You know, in terms of what you and its purchasing power is around the same. Yep. Huh. Well, and what they do, so part of what they do here in the United States is they will differentiate themselves and they'll have Heinz ketchup natural and Heinz ketchup organic and Heinz ketchup organic now preservative free. And so then you're sitting there looking at like 4 different ketchups in the back of them and you're just like, this one has citric acid, but this one has, like, I don't know, I just want ketchup. So yeah, so they will differentiate. That way they can get all of the producer surplus, essentially, right? I mean, because if they can. Yeah, send that to me. Email it to me. No, I'm down. So, okay, we should move on. It's a very interesting conversation. This could be like a forum for the next time I do this class online or something, right? For this chapter, so something cool could come out of this. So thank you. All right, moving on. Let's do a HHI index now. Oh, that's way too close. Oh, I hate that noise. I hate that noise so much. Oh, I turned it off today. That mail noise. I was in a meeting, like a Zoom meeting, and the person who was directing the Zoom meeting, so like her microphone was never off, had that stupid noise go on. Go off. I probably shouldn't say this. She's not gonna watch it. But yeah, the mail ding went off so many times. The Joe was crazy. Okay, my volume's up. So, awesome. Question 2. So we are told an industry consists of 3 firms with the sales of, so we'll just call them firm 1. That's going to sales of 300,000. We've got firm 2 with the sales of 700,000. And we've got firm 3 with the sales of 250,000 buckaroos. We are asked to calculate the Herfindahl-Hirschman index. The Herfindahl-Hirschman index. I must work on. I only have good Russian accent. I do not have my German accent very bad. Cannot do. I have not spent enough time around wonderful German people. I cannot absorb their accent. All right, so we'll do HHI is equal to, what's HHI scaled between? 1 and 10,000. That's over 9,000. Joke for all my anime nerds out there. And this is going to be times the sum of all of the industries that we're told about. So we only have 3 this time, which is sweet. The individual sales of that company over the total. All right, so how do we unpack this summation symbol? Yeah, thank you. That was a test, G, you passed. Good job. There is definitely a squared there. So let's talk about that squared real quick, because that squared is not, it doesn't show up in the other one, right? So remember when we talked about regression analysis. I know that was a tough day. But when we talked about regression analysis and we talked about the least squares method, right? And how that's how it draws the line between all the points. And I told you that the reason why it squares the points is twofold, right? It's once because by squaring it, the negative errors don't cancel out positive errors, right? You, instead of apples to anti-apples or matter to antimatter, you're switching all of it to matter so that you can add up how much it's deviated, right? And then you're also squaring it so that it will do two, so the second thing is that it's going to punish any points that are further away than like 2, because 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 16, 10 becomes 100, right? And then it's going to reward any points that are closer than 1, because 0.5 becomes 0.25 when you square it, 0.25 becomes 0.125, 0.1 becomes 0.01, so on and so forth, right? So the same kind of thing is happening here, where we're going to be squaring the industry ratios, and so any sort of abnormally large industry ratio is going to impact the HHI kind of in an outsized way. So here, let's do this example first. HHI equal to 10,000 times. So this first one, what's on the numerator? On top? 300 divided by the total. What's the total? Exactly. And then what are we going to do? G, we're going to square it. Can't forget to square it. That's a big no-no. All right. And then we're going to add the second concentration ratio squared. So this is going to be 700K over 1.25 million squared. And then we're going to add the last one down here, plus 250 over 1.25 squared. So if we do that calculation, it all comes out to 4,112, which is our final answer. So remember, it can be between 1 and 10,000. Let's go back to our textbook. Let's take a look at some examples of this again in table 7.2. We've got some examples of the HHI for distilleries, even though the C4 percentage is 70%, right? The HHI is much lower. So what does a larger HHI mean? What would the HHI of 1 be? Of a monopoly. No, the monopoly would be 10,000. So here, we're told right here, yada, 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 a value of 10,000 arises when a single firm, because the market share, that's this weight that we're calculating, is equal to 1. So it's just going to be 10,000 times 1. So when it's 1, that means that there's a lot of concentration in it. There's a ton, right? So it's never going to actually be one. It's sometimes going to be 10,000. Very occasionally, right, when there's only one firm in the industry. But often it'll be somewhere between 10,000 and, you know, probably not going to get down to the tens, somewhere between 10,000 and 100. But theoretically, it could get down to one. It'd have to be a really crazy industry. Oh, sorry. We were looking at the table. Okay, so back to the table. So what's going on here? So why is this showing up so high? Do we actually buy 70% of all of the whiskey and vodka and other stuff like that from Ford? No. So again, this is another flaw of the way that this data is collected, right? It's the fact that it doesn't account for foreign companies that have penetrated our markets, and we import lots of Russian vodka and other sorts of, you know, spirits and things from abroad, right? And so that's part of the reason that when we then expand that to all of the different distilleries, not just the top four, we end up getting an HHI that's much more reasonable, right? It's nowhere close to 10,000 or 5,000 or whatever. It is still relatively high though, compared to some of the other ones. Like, see, we do have one in the tens. Only one though, 62, furniture and related products. So there is barely any concentration in furniture and related products, right? Which makes sense. I mean, there's concentration in mattresses. There's concentration in what's very similar to furniture, but there's concentration in televisions, I bet, right? Don't we have televisions on here? Maybe not. Someone should find out. What's the HHI for the television industry? I'd be curious. But that's very, very low, right? Jewelry, not costume jewelry, is low as well. Same thing with men. So all of this is really corroborating the very low C4s for the most part, right? And then the motor vehicles being large, that correlates to a large HHI, you know, relatively to the rest of the ones we're seeing. Ready-mix concrete's low. That's still low. Semiconductor is low. Still low over here. Snack foods are 53% with the C4 and almost 2,000 with the HHI. So I don't think they actually discussed this specifically. So that would be something that we should all ponder. And if you have any suggestions or hypotheses, I would encourage you to email me, possibly for extra credit, and we can talk about it in class on Monday. What's going on with the snack foods? What's the deal between their C4 and their HHI? And then the other ones are mostly corroborative. We've got, you know, middling ranges here, low value here, right? All right, awesome. Moving on. Next question. I guess I could just put it up instead of reading it out to you. Let's not calculate the four-firm concentration ratio, but let's do C. Based on the FTC and DOJ horizontal merger guidelines described in the text, do you think the Department of Justice would attempt to block the horizontal merger between two firms with the sales of 300,000 and 250,000? So what is the HHI? What's the post-merger HHI under the guidelines? And then what's the recommended amount of HHI increase? So there's two things that they're really looking for. You guys want to do problems and you don't want to go through the text, and then you don't read the text. It's killing me small. You should take better notes. Notes? No, your brain's not smart enough to remember it and memorize it. You gotta take notes. Reading it. Sure. The for sure though really convinced me. Okay. Yes, someone that has read it. Mm-hmm. Right.
And then like this one is still like 700,000. But then like my question is, this horizontal method is not going to match to this. Like, does this company still have about? I feel like it's still going to be like this. Because even if these two companies are like horizontal, still not going to take the edge terms. But then what is going to do is going to affect other companies like
But we're assuming right now, because we calculated the HHI, we're assuming that these are the only 3 companies in the industry.
oh, okay.
But the reason why they wouldn't allow it isn't because, as a rule, they don't allow duopolies or whatever. Yes. If it was vertical, there would be different conditions they'd be looking at. The horizontal merger, they're specifically looking at cutoffs in the HHI. So let me go over them. Cutoffs, yeah, there's certain cutoffs in the HHI that essentially, okay, so here's what's going on. So this is part C, right? And so the guidelines say that the post-merger HHI the extra credit was about, well, one of them was about television, right? And about that, I was asking about what the HHI and stuff was for television. And the other one was explaining the snacked foods line in table 7-2. All right, so the post-merger HHI cannot be greater than, so I'm going to say cannot be greater than, right? 2,500. That's their line in the sand. That's their arbitrary no-no zone. Or the HHI cannot increase by more than 200. So what happens to the HHI if we allow this merger to go through? It'll be more than 200, and it's going to be over the limit, right? So the post-merger HHI would be, here we can do it right down here, HHI is equal to 10K times, it's going to be 750K over 1.2 million squared plus 700K over 1.25 million squared. Those parentheses. And that ends up equaling 5,072. And so that is more than that, right? So it's violating that condition. And then the change in it is 960. Is greater than 200. So we're violating that condition as well. Questions on that? Yes. So there are enough of them that they're not like monopolizing or duopolizing it, that they are, and they're not even really what we call an oligopoly. So they're closer to an oligopoly, but they're technically monopolistic competitive, right? Where there's some branded product differentiation. You know, that's why they spend so much money on advertising, and you know, the margins are pretty thin. They rely on low-wage workers. I'm trying to think of like what are some of the other characteristics. I mean, those aren't the low-wage workers isn't really characteristic, but essentially it comes down to the fact that, I mean, even though like we see them everywhere, there's you know, a dozen of them that really comprise, you know, like 2/3 of the market share, and that's really what they're looking for in terms of like, is there too much? They're looking for and we'll get to this, but the technical definitions of oligopolies is by looking at the concentration ratio and seeing is it greater than like 60%. And so I don't think that those industries, I mean, we can do a quick search. Fast food. I mean, fast food could be mixed in with a bunch of other stuff, though, right? Electrical? What do you mean? Electricity? Yeah. Well, but that's a natural monopoly, right? I mean, we're literally giving. So the reason why we do that is because we don't want a bunch of firms, HHI. What else should we say? HHI or C4? Maybe that'll. All right, I'll have to find it. But wait, slide player, very reputable source, slideplayer.com. All right, what was your question again? Because we don't want a bunch of people. Here we go. We don't want a bunch of people laying power lines, you know, above or below all these houses and stuff like that. And so essentially, the government either runs it directly or they give specific special rights to people to run it. And then they charge them for those rights every year, or they'll charge them like based on, so actually this is a really good segue to what we're going to be learning on Friday. That's on Friday. Yeah. If you can't make it, just watch it on Zoom. But yeah, we're going to have that class on Friday because we got to finish this because you guys got to test on it. So, it's okay. It's okay. Just watch it on Zoom. So, you know, just then you can ask questions and stuff and just watch it live. I mean, that way you don't have to watch it later on YouTube. So I'll send the invite out to you. There's a few ways that they'll price them. One of the ways is they'll say, well, your costs are this, and your operation should only cost 20% above your costs. So we're only going to pay you 20% above your costs. But that leads to perverse outcomes, right? Because of those incentives in terms of they'll inflate the costs, right? They'll cut deals with their buddies or something like that, and they'll inflate the costs that come in, or they'll, you know, buy themselves really lush furnitures or have a bunch of, you know, like expensive outings or conventions or whatever and say they're necessary, yada, yada. So we found that the HHI is 636.4, not relatively high compared to the other ones we're looking at. But if we look at just the C4, again, it's pretty high, but not as high as that oligopoly ratio that I was saying, right? That cutoff. So we see McDonald's has the lion's share, Yum, None of us know what Yum is. Yum owns a bunch of different ones. They're like the Procter & Gamble of fast food. No, Yum, exclamation mark right here. They own KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, a bunch of other franchises. And that's why you'll see KFC, Taco Bell, like combined places. Which are kind of fun. Because McDonald's rocks. Because McDonald's got to kids. McDonald's sold Happy Meals and happiness and play things, you know what I mean? Like McDonald's brainwashed a whole generation of Americans, and they still have awesome toys. I mean, you know, Burger King's a thing of the past, I think, at this point. Like, I would be shorting Burger King if I had some money to play around with, for sure. They started selling tacos. That's when you know it's desperate. Burger King selling tacos. All right, anyways, Subway's got 6.3. No surprise there. Wendy's at 5.3, you know, that's pretty good. Now, when was this made? Because I don't know if you guys have been seeing like the memes and the tweet wars between Wendy's and Chick-fil-A, and Chick-fil-A's like, we're so popular, we have to take one day off a week just to give y'all a chance. Yeah, on Sunday or whatever. Anyways, so I don't know where Chick-fil-A actually stands in this, or what the market share of Chick-fil-A is. But interesting data. You know, got to take it with a grain of salt since it was just a random set of slides that I found. But, you know, it had some people's names with some universities attached to it. So, you know, a little bit of due diligence, 5-10 minutes of Googling, we can figure out if it's BS or not. But let's do questions instead. Okay. Let's do the Rothschild Index. Who knows what the Rothschild Index is without looking at their book? You can look at your notes. If you take notes, that's awesome. I'm gonna get better at this thing, guys. I promise. This is a question 3. So we are told. Well, again, I can show you. Question 3. Suppose the own price elasticity of the market demand for retail gasoline is negative 0.8. The Rothschild index is 0.5. And a typical gasoline retailer enjoys sales of 1.5 million annually. What is the price elasticity of demand for a representative gasoline retailer's product? Everyone's still as a beacon. So we've got to figure out our Rothschild index. We've got to focus. There we go. So our Rothschild index is on page 211 of the text. And it says R is equal to the elasticity, T, for the total market, divided by the elasticity for the particular firm. And it tells us the sensitivity to price of the product group as a whole relative to the sensitivity of the quantity demanded a single firm to a change in price. So we are told the elasticity, and we are told the Rothschild index on page 225. So going back to page 225, where the question is, we are told that the home price elasticity for the market demand of retail gasoline, the ET, is equal to negative 0.8. And the Rothschild index is 0.5. And a typical gasoline retailer enjoys sales of 1.5 million annually. So how do we get at tackling this? Where do we start? Well, let's figure out the elasticity for the representative firm in the industry. Since 0.5 is the R, that's going to be equal to negative 0.8 divided by the elasticity of the firm. So, therefore, elasticity of the firm is equal to negative 0.8 over 0.5 or negative 1.6. And that's the end of the question. This is just extra information they gave us. Questions on that? It's pretty straightforward. It's a little heady to kind of really understand what it's saying. If it's greater than 1, let's see here. Okay, so it takes on the value, between 0 and 1. When it's 1, that means that the individual firm has a demand curve that's the same sensitivity to price as the market, right? But when the elasticity for a firm's product is much greater than the elasticity of the market demand, then the index is close to 0. So that means that the individual firm's quantity demanded is more sensitive to price than the industry as a whole. So if the industry is less than 1, let's say there's a 10% increase in one firm's price, that's going to decrease that firm's quantity demanded by more than the decrease in the total industry quantity demand. So it's how price sensitive the individual firm's demand is relative to the entire market. So in a way, it's measuring the concentration kind of indirectly, right? It's measuring how much of a substitute your competitor's goods are, and how likely you are to take a abnormally outsized hit if there were to be an increase in the price. Okay. Question 4. All right, so we are told firm has $1.5 million in sales. The Lerner index is 0.57. The marginal cost is 50. And it competes against 800 other firms in this relevant market. What price does this firm charge? By what factor does this firm mark up its price? Do you think that this firm enjoys much market power? So we're told the firm has 1.5 million in sales. We're told the Lerner, L-E-R-N-E-R, Lerner index is 0.57. And we're told the marginal cost is $50. The number of competitors is 800. And we're asked, what is the price that they would charge? So we can use our Lerner index formula. Find our blue pen. All right, well, we're going to go with green. So our Lerner E equals 1 divided by 1 minus L times marginal cost. So essentially, it's a constant markup pricing model. So whatever your marginal cost is, you're going to charge so much above that. And how do we figure out how much above that you charge? I mean, it's a lot to do with what your competitors are doing. You know, it's what your opportunity cost of your time, of your resources, of the shareholders' resources, so on and so forth, right? So we'll go through a graph of that in a second. But let's get back to the problem. So evaluating this, we have 1 over 1 minus 0.57 times 50, which gives me $116.28. Now I know it'll probably be $114.99, right? You know, like you'd never see this price in reality, but whatever. You know, this is economics. When I was working at the International Monetary Fund, one of the funniest things somebody told me was that the whole thing is a joke. You know how you know? And I was like, how? And they were like, there's decimal points in the GDP calculations and stuff. Like they actually think that they can measure the economic output down to the cents every year, which is just insane, right? And I was like, I never even really thought about it like that, but that is kind of crazy. Okay, moving on. So if this is the price, if this is the Lerner index formula, then we're asked what is the markup ratio? The markup ratio is just this bit. So this is going to equal 2.33. So what does that mean? In English, the firm charges 2.33 times the marginal cost of producing the product. Producing the product of the product, you know. And so, from this information alone, before we even look at other industries and what's going on there, does it seem like there's a lot of price competition happening in the market? No, you're charging double the marginal cost, right? Exactly. So this suggests, so this is the B part right here, and now we're doing the C part. So this suggests that price competition, oh, sorry about running late. We'll finish up here. Competition. They're like, I'm just gonna keep unzipping and rezipping my backpack, and he's gonna figure it out. And the firm enjoys market power. All right, that's it. We got class on Friday. Please come to the Zoom call at it'll be at 1 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, wherever you are in the world. Figure that out. Show up, ask some questions to still get participation points. Otherwise, you can watch it on YouTube, but you won't get participation points unless you're on the Zoom. But what? You have to be connected. Can you call? You don't have anything? You don't have WhatsApp?